Welcome to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger Partners, and I am joined today by Sandra Gurley. She is our Creative Director. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives, and I'm excited to have you on. You've been with us for
a year,
and this is the first time you've been in the podcast chair with me.
I'm so excited and honored to finally get to have this moment with you, Eric.
Well, let's make sure we'll ask at the end. You still feel that way? So. Creative director. So
yes, that's right.
And so I kiddingly tell people that you're responsible for the pictures, which is not true at all.
Sometimes it's true, but
sometimes, you're responsible for the thing that I don't do well.
The images and the branding and the design fun.
Yeah.
Yes, that is my thing here at Liger.
Yeah, we have a thing called Pride Rock every week, and so in Pride Rock we play games. And one year we played like a Pictionary game, and I literally was asked to draw the logo, and it looked like a clown. Everybody kept saying, "You drew a clown," and I'm like,
so funny.
"No, I drew the Liger head." And they're like, "No, you didn't."
Oddly enough, I am actually not great at Pictionary. Other people might say that I am, but I'm like, this is not good. I'm not great at Pictionary.
So, creative director.
Yes.
So that. When you go, I'm watching this series right now about Mad Men.
Yes.
The true Mad Men, right?
Yes.
And the creative director was like one of the positions that people wanted at a company like ours.
That's so cool.
Everybody thinks it's like, the sexiest job. So
I try to make it true.
Make it true?
Do that.
Yeah. Okay. So what does a creative director do?
So a creative director, we are overseeing branding and making sure that our clients are loving their visuals. We want to bring all of that to life. And the role is so exciting, especially today, Eric, because right now, there's so many opportunities to be seen in the world, and that is our role. We are trying to help these clients, these brands, be seen and be recognized. And there's so much involved. So we have, you have the writers that are responsible for voice and tone, but then we have this nice marriage that comes together where we bring life to the visuals and the imagery and the photography and the color tone. And the typography, it's a world of wonderful opportunity to make a brand exist and thrive.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, and it's that, you talk about voice and tone, right? And it reminds me, and this is going to be a crazy reason why it reminds me of this, but Daniel Craig, who played 007.
Yes.
And so he's always like suave and whatever.
Yes.
Have you ever seen the movie Logan Lucky?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Or it's Lucky Logan, one or the other. He plays this like completely different character, and so they go to visit him. He's in prison when they go to visit him, and he has like this southern drawl.
Oh wow!
And so it so doesn't match what you expect, right? Because the creative is like, oh, this is how this is, and then so making those two things kind of
come together.
Yeah.
I
feel like they're should
That's
be in
really
the same
exciting.
place.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And so today, because we're around the kind of the Halloween season, so some of the shows that we were putting together are around, the concept of mistakes or crazy things. So I think you're going to talk to us about deadly design.
That's right. There are deadly design disasters out there, Eric. And right now, during this season, it is so much fun to talk about, but they're there, and they're there all year. Oh. Not just Halloween time.
And you see, this is where a lot of sort of entrepreneurs or business owners, marketing people get really nervous, right? Because design and sometimes feels subjective, but then there's times you can make a decision that's a bad one, So what's deadly? Like what could be deadly?
Well, deadly could be as little as small as just like missing a thing, like missing. This is not too small, but sometimes, you have your color palette, if you will. Maybe you put something there that the client didn't want, but nobody else recognizes that, right? And it's still okay. It may be a color tone off from their brand color. But again, when nobody else recognizes it, sometimes it's okay. But when it's deadly, deadly can come from so many creepy, crawling things in the work. And there's a lot of them that are funny, but typography could lead to something quite awful. You have the opportunity, again, to show your brand on shelves in stores or on the road with signs or at an event. Large format billboards, it will be seen. Social media, it will be seen. And even though we're in a world right now at a time where people just glance at things, we're processing things quickly.
Right.
We see the things.
Yeah.
We see the things, and we love to see the things. That is what we do, and it is even more important to make sure that everything checks out. So the disasters live everywhere. I think there's a saying, God lives in the details, or is it the devil lives in the details?
Yeah.
All right, well, since it's
One or
Halloween,
the other.
we'll stick with the devil, because that seems to be fitting of the season, but it's so true. But there's a lot of funny things, too, out there.
Well, the thing about design that it's being done right, and you talked about short attention spans and things like that. Knowing who the brand is before you know who the brand is.
So true.
And that's that split second, right?
That's right.
That's what I love about really big brands that have done a good job is you can start to see their commercial rolling,
That's
and
right.
before you see the logo, you're like, oh, that's a Publix commercial.
Absolutely.
That's Apple. That's Target. Whatever.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, it's the color. It's the fontography, the weight of the letters, it's the quirk of the way they bring in motion. It's all of that. I mean, it's the personality. And when you get to know that personality, you know when they're being fake. Yeah. And that's what you don't want. You don't want that false veneer. You want it to be authentic. And
yeah.
It's a really exciting role today. I mean, that's something that I'm so proud of. I'm proud of being a part of that. I'm proud of being a part of this marketing creative environment where it's well respected. And our clients are demanding that. They're needing that. They know what other brands are doing, and so they're expecting the best.
In what ways is it not respected? So like where can it be where people think it's kind of like hooey? Is that a word?
It's a word because I'm hearing you. Can you ask a different way? What are you asking?
Well, you said that in our space, clients will often come to us and they want to change. They're like, we know our brand needs to be updated. So that is fun, right? Because they come to us and like, hey, so what would you do with this, right? And we've been able to escalate some badly needed escalation.
That's
brands,
right. Mm-hmm.
But you were talking about, are there situations, because I think I'm so used to being in situations where design has always sort of been an important thing.
Yes.
Are there places that you see companies sort of thinking design is just like a...
Absolutely not, Eric. Design is the most important thing in an agency.
I know in an agency.
No. In any company. I mean, I think because of the role, the journey that I've been on, I haven't really experienced where it didn't matter. And if ever there was a time, I would say, and I'm not going to put the name of the company out there, but there are more corporate heavy companies that they're not paying attention to their look and their feel. It's more about what they do. But I want to even bring that back 20 years, not to say that, because I'm only 26. So.
Yeah, right.
But I feel like across the board now it matters.
Yeah, it does.
It's relevant across the board. And where I was saying before, it's like, you take a big name. And this is not who I'm talking about, but, if it's IBM or, you mentioned Mac, but they've always been creative. Insurance companies, financial technology companies that we work for. Before, that wasn't anything important for them. Like, it was just what we're doing. We want to make sure that all of that work is correct. They didn't worry about the brand, but because of the world of web and because of the way we are marketing and social media and all that's out there, you have to look good.
Yeah.
From head to toe, you have to look good.
Yeah, and what's interesting is we do so much B2B. That's 95% of our portfolio. And so you think in B2B, it's like, oh, maybe brand isn't as important because it doesn't show up, but it does. You're still selling to a customer, a person that's going to either remember you or not.
That's right. That's right.
My thing about design, which isn't necessarily the right way to look at it, is make it visceral. I want a visceral response. I either want to hate it or I want to love it.
That's right.
But I don't want to just walk past it.
That's beautiful, and I've heard you say that, and you're right. I mean, that's. I think that's a perfect way to describe what you're wanting that to be. If it's something, and I have a joke sometimes, someone, you walk into a room, they're
Sandra always has jokes. She has lots of jokes.
Or, you go into a room, they're like, I'm not talking about you, and you've probably heard me say this. We're not talking about you, promise. And I'm like, well, talk about me. I'm okay with that. good, bad, as long as I'm on your mind,
Right.
it's fine. So I think that's kind of like what you're saying, you know.
Yeah, we did a logo one time for a client, and it had this like long stripe, and it was like we did this long, like looked like it was extra,
Okay.
you know, like it needed to be cut off.
Yeah.
And so we spent like 15 minutes talking to the client about that. They're like, well, that feels like it's extra, and da-da-da-da. And I'm like, do you know how long we've talked about this?
That's
it's
exactly
like,
right.
If you put this logo out there, everybody's going to be like, why did they do that?
That's right.
That's so weird.
That's
it's like this
right.
long stripe, and da-da-da-da.
Yes.
And I'm like, and they paid attention.
Right.
That's the whole point.
Sometimes tension is good, you know, and that works in the design world too. If there's not a blip, but if there's something out there that's kind of a little uncomfortable, you can balance that with something beautiful, you know, on the other side of it, or it's a color, or, you know, a little dot or something. But that tension, that's worth talking about.
Yeah, and also
it stands out.
Yeah, and makes what we can talk about that what our clients do mostly is boring, right? It's boring, right? But but you still want someone to pay attention because it may be the difference in why you choose.
That's right. That's right. I mean, when you are networking or when you are talking, you know, whether it's the business card or it's, you know, sharing the QR code, people are wanting to see your brand. You know, they'll visit your website, or they'll see a thing that you have done in a transaction, or, you know, they're going to go to your social media, or they're going to go to your LinkedIn. But there is that impression. There's that banner up there, and you will decide whether or not they are well thought out. Are they intentional? And that starts from that point of view. It's initial. It's everywhere.
Yeah. And so how do you know? How do you, Sandra Gurley, know? Like when you're looking at a design or looking at is it just a like innate second nature thing?
Right.
Like how do you know that?
Well, I love that question and hate it because you know, I don't think that it's necessarily innate. Sometimes I kind of like thinking that, hey, I am special and I can pick up on something that you can't. But I'm not a chef, but I can certainly taste when something's bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I might not be an interior decorator, but sometimes you go into a room and you're like, oh, that's off. And then you start feeling bad for the people that don't realize that.
And literally, I walk around all day long thinking Sandra sees something.
That's so funny.
I don't see it
at all.
We
pick up on things, but you do too. I mean, you pick up on things, and that's why when I show you something after it's approved, and when I hear you get excited about it, it adds value because you have relevance in that space. You know. However, you know, if it's innate, that's the part that I want to talk about. I do know that when you decide to go on a journey, or you realize, hey, I like this thing and I'm pretty good at it, you're just feeding it, and you get better and better and better at it. And so sometimes things do maybe appear quicker. Yeah. Right?
Because it feels like, so have you ever read any of Malcolm Gladwell's stuff?
No.
Okay, so he's got 2 books, Tipping Point and Outliers.
Okay.
There's a lot of them, but and I'm hopefully getting the storylines right. But you should read them, because in Tipping Point he talks about how even people could walk into a museum and they could tell a statue was fake just because of like there was something about it.
Okay.
Right? Now they weren't experts, but there was just something about it that was off, and so they knew it wasn't real. Right. Which is kind of this like being a beginner and knowing it's kind of weird. Which, you know, as we're talking to executives, like, maybe, you know, that gut is always important. Like when you first, it's like, if you think it's off, like, is it off in a good way or is it off in a bad way, right? And then the other is Outliers, which is people who spent 10,000 hours doing something, and so it just becomes like second nature to them. You know, it's like
those sound like good books to read.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite writers. So he tells. They're all little stories, little vignettes, so it's not like
a long read,
boring, right? Each chapter gives you a little vignette that then reinforces part of that. It's like what the dog saw and David versus Goliath. So like why why it's the big companies don't win and the small do, like what the real reason is behind that.
Oh, neat.
Some of that kind of stuff. So anyway, all right, well, we're going to go to a commercial break.
Okay.
And when we get back, I want you to spill the tea.
Ooh, I
want you to actually give me some examples of some companies you think like are some examples of some things
Disastrous
that were
design?
disastrous. So,
I think that's fun. You're going to love this. This is a lot of fun.
And
There's a lot of
then
fun things.
we'll have some of our listeners look at their designs and like, oh no, maybe I need to think about this again.
Can't wait.
Maybe some of the ones you've wanted to like fix.
No, I always want to fix.
All right, we'll be back in just a second. I'm talking to Sandra Gurley. She's creative director at Liger Partners. You are listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, chief strategist. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives, and we'll be right back.
The Claw podcast is brought to you by Liger Partners. Liger Partners is a premier marketing firm where we save the world from boring, broken marketing. We get underdogs recognition because you deserve it. For more information, go to ligerpartners.com and follow us on all social media platforms at Liger Partners.
And we're back. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, chief strategist at Liger Partners. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives, and I'm talking today with Sandra Gurley. She is the creative director at Liger, which means she's responsible for all the pretty pictures and images and all those kind of pieces.
That's
Not
right,
at
Eric.
all. I just know that if we give it to Sandra, she's gonna shoosh it or nooch
That's
it
right. That's a
or
great word.
whatever.
Zhoosh, yeah.
Zhoosh. She's gonna zhoosh it.
Oh my
It's
gosh,
gonna come
I've
back
heard-
a little better.
I love it. So, not to take away from where we're getting, which is talking about super creepy, terrible, disastrous design, but you say zhoosh, and I love all the words and the sounds that appear on the creative briefs from our project managers. It's awesome. It's like make it pop, add a swoosh, add a like there's
Give it some
spelling.
air.
Yeah. Or like, can you do something to make this really blast out? I'm like, sure, I can add some gunpowder. But I
Admit
get
it.
it.
You guys hate that stuff.
No, I'm not gonna admit it. It's cute. It's cute.
It's like because
Sometimes I'm like, oh.
my love language is words. I love words, but I love words. I've learned working with all of you. I'm a concise kind of guy. Like if you can say it in 3 words, like I will say it in 3 words.
Right.
That's instead of 30,
Yes.
which is a crazy because if you know me, I have a problem landing the plane sometimes. It's like Kristen
But
Lee.
I don't know,
Kristen
yes.
Lee, who's one of our
Yes.
developers, has literally told me, she's like, "Can you tell me in 5 words or less?"
I have heard her say
I'm
land
like,
the plane. I have.
I'll do 50 and we'll get to 5. It'll be good.
But I do experience both from you, Eric. I do know that. I think it's in your Slack message, and it might be because you know that I have a low attention in Slack. But you do. You're concise. But in conversation,
Well,
you're verbose in a good way. So.
in Slack, I'm the problem child because I like to do like 5 words, 5 words, 5 words, 5 words instead of writing them all out. But that's how I'm thinking. It's like machine gun.
Oh my goodness, that's funny.
So deadly designs. So
Yes.
deadly design. What'd you say? Deadly design
I said,
disasters.
yeah,
right?
I thought that would be a fun way to call it for the season, but deadly design disasters, and there's so many. And I know that a lot of designers will be able to relate and probably remember experiencing a lot of this. But all of the things that I'm going to talk about, you experience it as a viewer or as a client or as a consumer, or just, you're seeing a thing on whatever social media handle, and you spot these things. And to me, I feel like those are disasters. So we can go right in and start talking about, okay? Well, one of the horrible things, I call them the creepy crawlers. We were talking earlier about how, the devil lives in the details. Well, that's a very big thing. I was saying, again, we are in such an exciting world for graphic designers. But there's a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. And, we were talking about the attention span. The work is seen. Whereas before, you might live in a folder, or you might be in a binder, or you might be in a brochure that sits on a table. But what we are doing today, people see it. People see it in the backgrounds. People see it on the tables, on the coasters. It's everywhere.
Yeah. And once you share something digitally,
It's
like
done.
it's there,
It's out there.
It's everywhere, right?
It is a commitment.
Yeah.
And when you are the creative director and you approve a thing, it is commitment. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, the creepy crawlers live there. So designers, so we are very creative, and we're taking a palette, we're taking a page, and we're doing all the things. And, we were talking about how that we have that marriage with the content and the copywriter. So we bring in all of these things, and, we want to make it beautiful. We want it to make sense. It needs to flow. The colors need to work. There's a lot of things involved. You know, you need to make sure that you're adhering to the brand. But we're not always reading. That is not our, like, we're handing that off to
Designers do not always read. And their design tools don't do spell check.
You know, I'm glad you brought up design tools, though, because
Yeah,
that
they
is the
don't.
truth.
They don't have squiggly red lines under them.
Right. So, but the thing is, because we are seen and because there's so much opportunity for mistakes, there's also, on the other end, there's a lot of tools out there to prevent that.
Yeah.
And it is so important that right now, especially now, we make sure that we are not triple checking, but we're also, we're going through and we're using your tools. You mentioned spell check. We do have spell check. I talked about brand
There's
in
spell
here.
check in Adobe products.
Yes.
I'm going to go find that designer that told me there wasn't.
Well, there wasn't before.
But there is now. Okay.
There is now.
Okay.
There is.
Because it's like it could show up in the creative at the end if you had like the red squiggly lines and things.
That's, well, so, you know, yeah, right. So Word docs, you know, the red squigglies. InDesign has that. Photoshop, you know, I'm not sure about that one, but Illustrator does. But yes, you do have an opportunity, and you're not supposed to be putting text in Photoshop anyway, amateur. Well, anyway, long threads of text. But so you have all of the tools out there to make things close to perfect, if not absolutely perfect. So there is that right now, you know. Back in the day, things took forever. You had the design, and then you had the team overlooking the design, and then you had mailing it, bringing it back. Now things are turning around in minutes. So even more, you need to flex those muscles and make sure that you're seeing the thing, and things need to stand out. So one of the disasters that I know, I had a graphic designer experience, but as a creative director, I approved it. And we have these two brands that look very similar. I'm not going to say their names. You might remember when this happened, but same brand colors, very similar business profile. And we had to make, but there's only one difference, is that one is a lot cheekier than the other. So we did a thing and made it all work out. I was actually new, so I didn't know all the clients by heart, but they turned this in and I looked at it and it took so much time and I was like, yes, the brand colors, and yes, this is great. Had fun with the concept, turned it in. And thankfully, project manager was like, hey, by the way, this is for, and I'm like, oh no! So to me, that's a disaster, because even at that time when you're trying to be perfect and you're paying so close attention to the colors and are the words making sense, is there balance on the page, all the things that you love to do, you can miss the big things too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely.
That's a big thing.
It is.
Logo. The wrong one. It's a big thing.
Well, that's a big thing, yeah. But if you're like in your seat, it's interesting, though. I guess companies that have like either multiple product lines and things would run into the same thing, but you're switching
gears,
personalities. You know, it's like, okay, now I need to remember this and what the design guidelines are and all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
Like that, to me, that is anytime. I just tell you right now, like things like nail on chalkboards for me is when a client's like, have you referenced our brand design guidelines? I'm like, oh my gosh.
We did. Actually, yes.
But you see, my problem, that's where I couldn't do your job, because I'm like, I don't know what's wrong.
That's right.
Like I'm looking at it and I'm looking at it and I don't know how this.
You know, that's really funny, Eric, because in your role, I wouldn't expect to see this, but I do often see your notes, like if it's in Slack or just a message. Hey, did you see their brand guideline? And it's not because it looks off. It's just you checking. Did you make sure that we?
That's all I'm doing.
That's right.
Literally only asking.
Because you're like, I don't want them to ask me that, and the answer should never be no.
Right. Because it's like when we send a thing over, that's literally all I'm doing. It's like I do not want to be asked. Did you check our brand guidelines? Because then they say that, and I'm like, well, did we? Do we even have them? Do we know where they are? Like, you know, and we have one client. Literally, we asked them like 4 times for their brand, and they sent it to us like 4 times. And so I was like, we are never, ever asking them for their brand guidelines again, right?
That's right.
And
we're going to create it for you. I am a true advocate for that. I mean, you need to have that. You need to have that guide. You know, that style sheet. That's something for the designers to I mean, designers can go anywhere.
Right.
We can, if you don't have a thing, we'll go everywhere, all the colors, all the seasons. But the client doesn't want that. We don't want to waste your time. So you should have a brand guide created if you don't have it. And I am an advocate of that. I mean, that was one of the first things I did. We call it a rock, right? So did a brand audit across the board of all our clients, and that's something that I like to do. But you check, and some of the things that you want to check, do they have their brand guide? Do they have colors? Do they have photography collection? If not, have we started one? All of those things. Do they have social media handles that showcase their tone? So all of that is very important when you're trying to figure out the personality of the client.
So that could be a deadly disaster if I don't have one of those.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, thanks for bringing it back and to reeling it back in. So let me go. Let's see if I can get a fun one, because I know that we are strapped for time and there's so many. But so the creepy crawlers was one. The terrifying typography things. I come up with that perfectly for this one.
That's nice.
But there are terrifying typography flaws that happen. But some of them are really funny. So I'm gonna talk about funny ones. We have gone through, I think a lot of us have seen, like, oh my gosh, there's some social media jokes about the things that you see on the street or the signs that go wrong. And those are the things that crack me up. But you can really make a terrible mistake on something intentionally so beautiful. So one that I want to talk about that I saw recently, and I can't remember if it was an article about the typography or if I really did see it. It was from Marietta Square, I want to say. So I don't think it was a typography. Anyway, so they have a lot of art festivals, especially this time of year. So maybe it wasn't Marietta Square, but on the flyer you see the words Festival of Arts. And and there is opportunity to have so much fun with typography. We love that, especially if you're talking about something of the arts, and you're going to have that beautiful long stem of the F, and it's Festival of Arts, and so arts is just next to this long F.
It was the Festival of Farts.
It was the Festival of Farts, Eric, and it's just, those are the things that just, you laugh, but then as that designer in me,
that has to be a food truck.
You just feel bad about it,
Yeah. It is funny when you see something, and it's
a food truck of legume, Festival of Farts.
It's all beans. The thing about that too is when you give something to a client, because we were renaming a brand at one point, and you kept asking about that, what do you see? And I had never thought of what you were seeing. I was like, I didn't see that.
But what do you see?
You every call we could get on this call, you're like, so when you say that word, what do you think that is? And I'm like, and then finally I'm like, oh, so that's what Sandra's been getting at, but she just hasn't said it.
Because sometimes, there's that other thing too.
But you then can't unsee it. That's the
exactly.
problem.
And
once you say it, you're like, well, we're done.
There's that commitment piece, Eric. So, and it's also in dialogue.
Yeah.
You don't. That's the hardest thing about being in one of our strategy meetings with clients, is to keep my mouth shut. That is hard, because you so want to lend an idea of, hey, you're going this direction. Do you see it? Because you want them to. You don't want to put that in there. You don't want to suggest.
Right.
And that is hard. And I know that you know that, because we deal with that all the time. But there is that power of suggestion. Once you say something, you can't unsay it. Once they see something, you can't unsee it. It's all you see.
Right.
It's the negative space.
Yeah.
We're working on a logo. We're not going to tell you which logo. But it's so funny. Remember that conversation we had, and we were just so mired into that one letter. And it wasn't because of the beautiful letter and what it was forming. It was that negative space that nobody would have picked up on. But I'm glad they did. Yeah. But until someone said, it looks like a rattlesnake. And I'm like, no! I'm like, let's stop talking about it. Because those are those disasters, those creepy crawlers that live. That was perfect for this segment.
It was. And that is one of the biggest challenges we run into, is the people who are very concrete. Mm-hmm. They see a thing and that's it. And we're like, that's right. That's not it.
That's right.
It's an example of it, right?
That's right.
And you have to walk that. Well, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So we were talking today about design. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad we have Sandra, because that's the part that I can't direct it all. I'm just no, I don't know if I like it or not. That's really all it ever is. So anyway, we have Sandra Gurley. She's our creative director at Liger Partners. You've been listening to The Claw, which is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. And until next time.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Claw podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, rate and review this podcast. And if you or someone you know wants to make an appearance on this show, email us at yourbestie@ligerpartners.com.